Hello, my name is Dagmara Szostak. First, I will introduce myself, and then I will talk about my topic. If you haven't if you didn't need translation yet for your technical documentation, it might be a good lesson for the future. But if you already translate your technical documentation, I will show you some problems we found in our job, and what advice can we give you to write it a little bit different or have different aspects in mind, so that your writing is more effective, faster, and our translation process is better for you as well. Oh. So first of all, I'm a project manager at Getting Language Solutions. I used to do more localization projects for one of the biggest agencies, global agencies, but now I'm currently into the translation projects. So I work with different type of professionals, from graphic designers, editors, proofreaders, and agencies from all over the world. And my interest is, I really enjoy working with people and building long-term relations, and I'm interested in effective project execution. So let's get to the topic. First of all, I will talk about areas where problems arise, this is derived from my experience, from experience of our company. So it's not a definite list, but it contains different aspects. So starting from terminology, I will tell you about how important is terminology, how important it is to keep consistency in your terminology and everything in order, and how sometimes we need to comply with clients' needs, especially when the client or a person uses totally different terminology than the rest of the branch, than the rest of the sector, and how to deal with it. Another issue are platforms. There's an issue of distributed content management, how to integrate CMS and CAT tool. CAT is a tool that we use, it's a computer-assisted translation. Every agency uses it, although I met some that don't use it. So it's a really outdated solution for us not to use CAT tool at all. And it really makes the whole process more effective. And for example, DType file is so easy to process, it's so easy to translate, and you will not translate the same sentence 2 times. So it's savings for you, and it saves time for us. So another issue is quality of the source file. There are different aspects of that, and every aspect has an impact on the translation process. So first you have linguistic, technical aspects. We have to balance the cost of translation versus quality. You cannot have it all. You cannot have high quality, low costs, and a very short amount of time to manage the process. So you have to choose 2 of 3. And sometimes the quality is not important, but in other cases, it's the most important. So there is the issue of readability versus also machine translation quality, and the awareness to work on closed file formats. People send us a PDF file and they think it's the best. No, it's better to send us a data file, XML file, HTML file, XLIF file, any other file, but PDF is really the worst. So we will talk about that later. And the process in itself. So different file formats, how to deal with them, how to integrate them, and of course the awareness of the possibility to work on the source. Many times people send us PDF files, but they have an editable version, which is much more easier to process, but they are not aware that we can work on that. So I will tell you that about all of that later. So let's get to the first issue, which is quality of the source file. So let's say we have a file that looks perfectly good for translation. You finished it and it will be, you send us to the agency, but it's not. And we find many problems. Sometimes even clients send us a Word file that the text is a picture, and the images, the text embedded in images, is the worst thing possible. And the other way around, the images embedded in text. So and we, when we get the file, we analyze the file and we find issues that maybe you didn't think about, that can create problems. Sometimes the formatting can be not right. People sometimes do not make automated table of contents, and they wonder why you didn't translate table of contents when it was made manually. And the whole formatting can be not correct if it's not created correctly, because after translation, the whole thing can be destroyed. When recently we've got a file that there was no sections at all. There were spaces and spaces. So we needed time to process and make the file look really good after translation. But when you do it after the process, it takes longer time, it takes more costs and more resources. So for us, it's really important to create clear and complete instructions. We need to know, I will tell you about what to include in those instructions. But the communication between technical writers and translation agencies, LSPs, language service providers, is really essential, because if we know more about what you want to what you expect, what you want to achieve, we can give you that. So what should be included in instructions? The worst case scenario is when there is no information about the scope, the tools, the versions of the project. So we know nothing, we just get the plain file. So there might be so many technical problems, dead links, as we said in previous presentation, or sometimes there are embedded objects such as Excel files in presentations, in documentation. And do you want to translate the whole embedded file, or maybe only the page you see, or maybe the part? And it's really, as I said, it's costly to do it after the first translation. So the more details you give us, the better outcome you receive, of course. And even such as format of deliverables. What kind of files do you want to receive? We apply the process according to your needs. So if you tell us all the information we need to get, we will give you what you want. And even organized folder structures, it's really, really useful to do that, because this way you can emphasize which files are important, eliminate those which are not important at all, and you can put reference materials in it and many other important information for us. And we always have QA. For us, QA is a major step, because there is always a person who controls the quality, who, if the quality is not kept, he gives feedback to the translator. We correct it. And what is really important is to review everything and update it, because if we don't update it, you have outdated information. So quality assurance is really, really important step in the process. You know that you have specific requirements to pass us, but how to do it clearly? Because you want to avoid the situation when the requirements are misunderstood. We want to make our customers satisfied. So, and the worst thing is inconsistency in translation. So what help us to keep consistency? Glossaries and style guide. So it's so important for us that you have your glossaries, or we can build glossaries for you, but it makes the whole process, it eliminates confusion, it makes the whole process with better user experience, it reduces ambiguity, and it ensures consistency in quality. So it's really important to keep in mind the translation memories and term bases that improve quality and make the translation faster. And I will tell you what to include in those glossaries and style guides in a sec. So we want to pass information, and for us it's very, very important to know the target of the document, because every language has its own lexicon of buzzwords. So in one language it might make sense, but in another language it might not. So giving us the information such as the target audience or the purpose of the document, we know what resources to choose from. There are great translators with great technical specializations and so on, but when it comes to more public relation materials or marketing materials, they're not doing it that right. So, for example, we need another step in the process that makes the whole style better suitable for you. So when we have this kind of information, we know how to process it. But if we just get the regular file, we just choose the way which in our mind would be the best, but it might not be the best at all. So having reference materials, it's really important. We can use previous translations or some other translations from the same group that might be very useful and that might build the terminology for your project. And other issues such as local specific requirements. We have clients that, for example, in pharmaceutical company, she doesn't want us to convert the numbers. So it doesn't make sense to keep the English numbers in the Polish documents, but for her it does. Her process, for her it's important. So we keep this kind of requirement. So the requirements must be so different. It all depends on the preferences of our clients. Sometimes for us they might not make sense a bit, but for them, for their process, it makes. There are many options, such as also general remarks on style, so to set the tone of the document, and language, the punctuation, capitalization. There are different rules, and we can comply with your wishes. And also such issues such as position of user interface items in different languages, in English versus German, the user interface items, they follow or their designations, or they precede them. So it all have an effect how the document will look later. Maybe you want to convert your measures, or maybe you want to convert them and leave the American version in brackets. There are many options, or what to do with the branding guidelines, to translate them, or to leave the trademark untranslated, or to choose another version. It all depends on what you want. So we are doing it to make you satisfied and happy. So once again, when we cooperate together, when you treat us a partner in this process, we can get to the solutions that you want. Maybe we don't have an answer for your problem, but if you tell us more about something, we can get to that point. So another issue is when you want to update your document. And it's really important to keep everything in order in your company, because it has an effect in later in translation. So even when creating the documents and later translating them, the way you create them will affect our translation process. There are many times when when we start translation and the client sends us a newer version. And if we had known that he will send us a newer version, we would prepare our resources and the process that you will not lose money and time on translating the document you don't want. And we have many solutions for that depending on the exact situation, but keeping in close contact and telling us as much as you can will shorten the process, and for sure it will reduce your costs. And I will give you examples of 2 companies that have a bit of complicated processes and what mistakes they make. So here you have the translation process. We got the XML file, so again, it's great. And there is the translation process. Of course, it's not only translation, but the QA, the editing, proofreading, it can be graphics formatting, and so on. And we send the file back. So it always ends the process in the middle. But then the client has a newer version in Spain. So then he sends our translation to Spain. Spain sends us their new version, and we have to review the differences, translate and localize them. So the second part of the process could be easily avoided if there was an order in the documentation of the company. Another example is when there is a company that has 2 production sites, one in China and one in Spain. So of course there must be inconsistency in translation already. And there are very low quality PDFs. The source files are really bad, and InDesign files that are also badly constructed. When we get, for example, the InDesign file, we analyze it segment by segment. It's really long, but if it's important, it really makes a difference. For example, there is a word such as bearing bush. So it's a mechanic part, right? But when the segmentation was wrong incorrectly, you will have bearing, which is an act, and a bush, which is a plant. And it will not be translated together. So it's harder to find it after translation that, it should be, this word doesn't make sense. But it's easier during the process of the documentation and preparing the documentation to find, we should join or split those segments. So that's why we really, we are analyzing the files and we are making them as easy to process later. And what's more, in this company, the source files were not the PDF files. So there was totally no control over the version of the document. There was totally no control of the flow of the document and of the quality of the document. So imagine that you want later to translate the documentation into many more languages. So getting to this point, which document is which, and after each process, the quality of the files might really decrease. It creates really complicated situations, and for sure it will need more time during translation and more costs to put everything in correct place. Another issue is with terminology. What if you want to keep your costs low and high quality, preferably, but you use different terminology than the rest of the company or sector? It happens, but it's important that you are aware that you use different terminology. It's good. You just want to distinguish yourself from the others. It's all right, but you need to tell us that. We really appreciate all the information, and maybe we can create a term base for you, a glossary for you. And of course, what we want to avoid is inconsistency, and to make the user understand the documents as best as possible. I really want to emphasize the importance of making those dedicated glossaries, translation memories, because sometimes the quality is not important. Sometimes the client needs the documentation to put to the drawer. So the quality is not important, but he has really short amount of time. So we are applying our process to his needs. And sometimes maybe just machine translation will be enough, and some post-editing, and the documentation will be ready. So if you don't count on very, very high quality. So we are trying to balance the costs and speed depending on your preferences. So here's an example of our client from the pharmaceutical company. And here you have the English terms, of course. And the first line, sorry for only English-speaking persons, but the first line is only acceptable by her terminology. And the last line is normal terminology that we always used for this client. So one time she ordered translation, and she was unsatisfied. She made a complaint, and we were surprised. Why? We used your terminology, everything was good. And the whole process of getting to the solution that we were giving our evidence that we used this because of that, and there is the reference material, and she did the same. And when we get to the conclusion, she just prefers different terminology. It's that simple. So just be aware. Be aware that you do this kind of thing, and just build glossaries or pass us information that you prefer something different. How to make source content easier to translate? There are some small aspects, such as different naming conventions. One of our clients, he doesn't allow us to change the name of the file, even to add the language combination, because he directly downloads the file from our system and uploads the file in his system. So if there is even a slight change of the name, he will not import the file. So for him, it's really important to do that. It might not be a big issue, but it makes his process very fast. And sample data might not be translated, and it happens many times when the client sends the file and maybe he doesn't know it that well, the construction of the file, or maybe the what possibilities there can be. So, and many times the images are embedded in text are embedded in images. So there are many ways to deal with that. You can do a bilingual file, you can edit everything, but for embedding text in images, it's better to do a callouts rather than doing that. And don't embed images in text. It's better to keep it completely separate, to just keep the images separate, but with, of course, logical naming conventions to the text. And it makes your files smaller in size when you don't keep images in text. So there are different issues regarding the creation of the document, and the two magic words are standardization and automation. So make everything the most automatic as possible. Indices, cross-references, internal, external links. When clients sometimes send us the doc files, which are really bad constructed, even the headings, as I said, the table of contents, nothing stays the same, and they are surprised. And making everything automated and makes the process easier when you want to translate it to more languages. And still managing your terminology, because terminology must be updated. Terminology changes and must be reviewed. So it's really important to keep in mind. And how to write your content so it's easier to translate. Of course, long sentences are hard to translate. They are hard to understand, and worse user experience is not what we want, of course. And there are many abbreviations, metaphoric expressions, and so on and so forth that are really hard to understand. If you target your document, of course, for a technical writer or serviceman and so on, it might be very technical and detailed, but if you want your content be more business-like or general, you also might need to use different words. It's important also to think about culturally linked expressions and to be not discriminative against race, sex, ethnicity, socioeconomic class, rather than using salesmen, use sales representative, or rather than using chairman, use a chairperson. So it's easy, it's a more general content, so it's relatable to everybody. And you don't know if this content will be later used for different audience. So also important to have in mind that for European languages, the content expands by 20–30%. So it may affect the formatting of the file, but also when we translate, for example, applications, there is also a limit in characters. So there is another issue you have to keep in mind. We can, if this is your requirement, we can have additional person who controls this. And the solution for all those issues might be simplification. Simplify everything, what you can. Simplify your writing, so write short and concise sentences, of course. Avoid idiomatic metaphoric expressions, avoid use of the modal verbs, and there are many advice, for sure you, as tech writers, you know them all, but I just want to tell you that it is also, by writing this way, it's easier to translate and it's easier for the end user. So be as gender neutral as possible, and maybe you can think about simplified technical English, which probably all of you know more than I do. But it's also useful because it reduces ambiguity. It really makes the whole translation content more coherent, and it improves translation memory matches. So for the future, it will be easier to translate. And I'm coming to an end. I have a conclusion for you, to treat language solution providers as a partner and include us in the process, not preferably in the beginning of the process, not at the end of the process. And in return, we will cooperate and you will have a successful outcome. So thank you for your attention. And
thank you, Dagmara. Do you guys have questions? A nice start of questions. It's going to be great. Okay, lots of questions.
Hi, thanks. Very nice talk. I'd like to ask you, what are the qualities of a good glossary? Something that, from your perspective, LPS company, what qualities does the glossary need to have so that you appreciate it?
Mm-hmm. The good glossary should contain mostly technical terms, or terms, for example, that should remain in English, that should not be translated. It's also worth mentioning them, but all of the terms that are not generally known. So if you need to think that, is it understandable for everybody? So this term needs to go to the glossary. So, so basically, the most complicated and not easy terms, but also everything that it's not generally known. for the public.
Okay, anyone else?
I actually thank you for the presentation. It's lovely. I actually have a bunch of technical, practical questions. How many languages do you support? Do you work? How actually do you work with translators? Are they freelancers or your employees? So how complicated for you is the editor and quality assurance process? And another one is how you process all the orders. So do you usually make the customers place them on your website to your system, or you can access their systems, or it changes from time to time?
Thank you. First of all, we translate to all languages. So even recently we got to Taiwanese or Thai, so any language you wish. I will make maybe an ad for a company based in Kraków, which is XTRF. I don't know if you know it, XTRF. And this is the whole system that you can place your order directly and it gets to our system directly. So really managing the graphic designers and the translators and the proofreaders, it's very easy because we have a part that are project managers who deal with mostly the translation and the whole process, but we have also customer section, of course, support, who deals with getting the orders. So when they get the order, they pass them to us. So that's why also the instructions are so important. Sometimes we get, for example, a folder with many files with reference materials, and there is a small note from TechWriter. And if it's so important, don't put it like in a folder and title it note from TechWriter, but make it more clear and loud. So this system really allows us to juggle all the issues, and it's easy to communicate with the providers and easy to oversee the whole process. And we see easily who's late, what evaluation that person got, because when the next person in the process gives us a feedback and says, oh my God, it was so horrible and very low quality, so then we have to act, and maybe there is a need for additional translator, of course, or additional step to help the process. So really this system helps to manage everything. Mm-hmm. Hopefully I answered your question.
Most of them, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, 2 more questions from you guys.
One comment, one question, if I may. The comment, the relationship between DITA and PDF, where DITA is what we like as translators and PDF is what we hate. You were talking documentation. So when we switch to user interface, user experience, there is exactly the same relation between programming formats like resources, properties, and the stuff, and Excel. So my warm message to all user interface designers: if you have stuff in a standard resources from C, or if you have Java properties, ask your translation agency whether they can support this as they are. Don't go to Excel and don't sort alphabetically. And now the question about PDF. What was the funniest PDF that you ever got?
Oh, the funniest PDF. It's when there is a really bad quality, you know, when we get a PDF of a scan when the part of the text is not visible, and the client sends the file and translates it, but you cannot see part, you know, half of the file, and then you have to get back to it. But what about the parts you don't see? And they say, okay, so maybe you can mark them as legible text or something, but you know, or maybe we have a better version we can send you. So, you know, it happens many times, especially with translation that is directed for certified translation. So there are like documentation and very important, and you don't want to make a mistake in it. So, yeah.
And the last question, I believe, was here.
Hi, I have a question about the beginning of the translation process. Do you know any solution that allows us to automate the cleaning process, the cleaning the source files process?
The cleaning.
It is also it's only a human work, or you've got some tools for that?
No, I think when you have a really good workshop of writing the document and you know how to create it from the headings to the references, there is not much cleaning to do. There is more cleaning if you do it incorrectly, and we have to correct it for you. But if you know how to make the automated things in your system you're working in, I think there is no need to do anything more. But if you have like some bad practices and you know that some issues can be done automatically, of course, better to do them.
And you are using some of this stuff?
I'm not translating and I'm not creating documentation. So we are a bit from this different part. But so we are, as I work with freelancers and with other people, we let those jobs to other people. Because as managing the projects, it takes lots of time. And if I had to do it by myself, I had to leave my work on site. So we just, give this job to freelancers.
Okay, that was the last question. Thank you, guys. Dagmara is going to be available for you in our soap corner right now. And, well, big applause to Dagmara. Thank you a lot.
Thank you.